Harry, a win is a win is a win, and Illinois is 2-2. And this is a record that a lot of people would have predicted. I gave my spiel on the Florida Atlantic game. I called the last podcast FEU because it left a lot to be desired. But what was your takeaway after watching that game?
Well, you remember what I was saying earlier in the week on the last podcast is that this is a game that you should win by 3 touchdowns. And, Fagan strolls into the end zone. Not only do you win by 3 touchdowns, you also cover the alternative spread that I had on this game. So I'm one of those guys that's a little bit sour, but I digress. I understand why he did it. No, I mean, what I take away from this game is that at the end of the day, what you said, a win is a win. It's not the prettiest win. It's probably, if you're looking at it and taking the score out, which is, stupid since it's football, but if you're taking the score out of it, you're probably more impressed with aspects of what you saw early on against Penn State, especially on defense. Not to say the defense was bad. Defense was fine against FAU, but it just looked like you didn't come out saying that this was, or knowing that this was a game that you needed to win and probably should have won in a dominant fashion. The offense did what it had to do. Luke had moments again. Isaiah Williams had one of the best catches I've seen an Illinois receiver make since, I think it was Steve Hull made a catch on his butt in the end zone years ago. And Malik Turner made another one, like a juggling one that was pretty cool. But it was an amazing catch. So I would say my overall thought of it is, hey, if you told me a month ago we were going to be 2-2, I'd say, okay, it makes sense. You beat Toledo, you beat FAU, you lose to Kansas, you lose to Penn State. That's exactly what happened. I think the problem lies in the blowout feeling that you have from your 2 losses. The score was closer than what the game really felt like, at least with Kansas, and with Penn State, it more so got away from you. And your 2 wins, the Toledo one, you can look at the score and see that it was a little too close for comfort. And this past one, yeah, you could have won by, what would it have been, 30-13 or 30-17, whatever it would have been if you had scored a touchdown on that last drive. A win's a win at the end of the day. And you just got to hope that this team knows that the real season begins this week.
I'd like to get your take on this, having been in locker rooms. And I look at the FAU game, and in my mind, as a fan that's never played anything above 8th grade Park District basketball, that this is a situation where I don't care who you are, human nature kind of dictates your performance based on your opponent. And after a disappointing loss to Penn State, where if you're an athlete at the level of these Illinois football players, they probably thought, oh, let's beat Penn State, let's get after it. Maybe a slight hangover from that game. Hence the 10-0 start from FAU, which had me, quite honestly, Harry, like, livid. Worst case scenario, existential crisis in the stands, right? But is it fair, or is it a little too, I guess, oversimplistic to say that the players may, in fact, have been overlooking this opponent a little bit because it was sandwiched in between the marquee home game and a game that we know at Purdue they've been talking about since last November?
I wouldn't say that they overlooked it. What I would think that the tendency to be would for the beginning of this game, because we had similar situations arise, notably in the 2014 season, when we opened up the season against, I think it was Youngstown State. You were losing and then you won. You had a game against Texas State. You were losing and then you won. All these teams that you shouldn't have gone down to in the first place, and then you end up coming back and winning by multiple scores for the most part. I think that what you do in a game like this past weekend against FAU is you come out and you think, we can do, we've been practicing, we're pissed off from last week, we're going to go out here just guns a-blazing and do what we got to do. And sometimes that's a detriment, because what ends up happening is you go out there and try to rely on your athleticism, and you forget kind of what you had been doing in practice all week. You'll get into film session on Monday or Tuesday. You're looking at the past game, and coach will say, hey, Jimmy Joe, what are you doing on this one? All week we were saying you're supposed to, on this route, cut in at 5 yards. You were doing it fine all week. Why'd you do it at 6 yards? Why'd you do it at 3 yards? And the answer is because, you weren't really thinking. You were just more so in game mode. You're trying to do more than what you were coached up to do. And sometimes, like I said, that can be a detriment when you think you can do that against a lesser opponent like FAU. And that's what I attribute the slow start to.
That makes sense. Just overall sloppiness, because you feel as if you don't have to pay attention to the details quite as much because you think you're athletically outmatching the opponent. I have this anecdote from when I was in 5th grade. I was in an all-star baseball team. And in fairness, they basically, if you had a pulse, you were on the all-star team. So I really wasn't a star by any stretch. And we played the Fisher 5th grade team. And here we are from big city Urbana. And we think we're bigger. We think we're stronger. They 10-run ruled us in the 3rd inning. And they all just looked a lot smaller than us. We made a rash judgment based on they're from a smaller town, they're smaller kids, we got this, and paid no attention to the things that had made us a pretty good team before that. Probably the weakest metaphor I've ever used on this show, Harry. I'm comparing my 5th grade all-star baseball team to Division I football. Yikes.
All I was going to say is I'm surprised in Fisher they're actually playing baseball and they're not more into fishing.
And so it's
that was the one of two things. The other thing was I was just going to say Fisher. I hardly know her, but that doesn't even work in that situation.
Well, I mean, you'd have to rack your brain a little bit, but it could work. Now, let's start with the offense, because if we just look at the box score minus the most important thing in the box score, which is the score, it was actually a pretty damn good game. You're talking 500 yards, 300 from passing, 200 rushing, and I know that Luke had some of it, but the bulk was from your running backs, and it was really well distributed. I saw after the game that Bret Bielema heaped praise on Barry Lunny, and I was scratching my head, like, what was he watching? And then I hear smart people like Jeremy Werner say, I think he called a pretty good game, and that after, let's say, a film session with Jay Lehman, it appears that the things that a lot of fans like myself are frustrated about really stem from, guess what, the offensive line. What did you see? Because if anything, I noticed them less in the Penn State game, for the better. And that against FAU, I thought, if anything, the offensive line reverted to a lot of the same issues in the first 2 games. And apparently it was even worse than I saw when I was in the stadium.
I mean, honestly, the reason that I would say you don't notice them as much in the Penn State game is because what's the one thing you noticed on offense in the Penn State game? It was Luke. But I would say personally, I thought I liked seeing what we saw last week with the running game. I saw, was there a play where Josh got banged up? I saw he had this was probably his best game that he's had so far this season, which isn't saying much. He kind of started a little slow, but Josh McCray had a couple good carries this game, and yeah, hey man, I mean, I think that the way that you get the offensive line going is offensive linemen like to run block. The more so, the more you see the running game pick up, the more it kind of translates over to, okay, they say the run sets up the pass, and that's not just because it stretches the field or it makes people, makes the defense have to, be more honest with what they're doing, but it's also because it gives the offensive line a bit of a break from having to just literally kick back and let these guys run straight forward right into you. It is not easy to stand your ground when 300-pound guys are trying to run past you and through you. It's much easier to try to do the same to them. So I think that, personally, I thought that the running game was on point, like you said. And I think that that's what they can take from this game going into Purdue, going into the Big Ten season, is seeing that, okay, if we kind of give maybe Luke a little bit more of a break like we did in this past game, then you won't necessarily have to rely on him as much. And the more you try to get the running game working, that inevitably leads to a stronger passing offense and a stronger passing offensive line.
Yeah, I was watching the game, and in the first half, when the run game was not working, I started to get frustrated thinking, okay, it's clearly not working. Pass first, set up the run. Does that work? Can it work in reverse with pass setting up the run?
Passing setting up the run, it can work. It can work because if you're able to stretch the field, like, let me put it this way: if the pass is able to set up the run, you're probably going to win that game by a couple touchdowns, or at least you should, because that means that they have to basically sit back and defend against the passing game. I couldn't name necessarily, well, that's a lie, but there's no all-star, superstar, Pro Bowl running backs on the Chiefs, yet they're still getting, they're still getting carries, they're still getting yards because the secondary has to make sure the best player in football isn't torching them. So then when they're sitting back in coverage, you hand it off to whoever, Isaiah Pacheco, and he gets 7-8 yards a pop because they're that worried for the passing game. You're obviously not going to get your passing game to be on that point, but I think that if you are able to make it so that your passing game is more formidable, if you're able to have more people than just Isaiah step up, then that's inevitably going to open up more lanes for the running back, not just because the offensive line is going to feel more comfortable running the ball, but because of the defense's tendencies then having to defend more so against the pass.
And that's why I'm encouraged by what we saw with Luke Altmeyer against Florida Atlantic and how that translates to this game. So there's this metric online. Kelly Ford does kind of a Ken Palm-esque thing for football, for college football. And he has Florida Atlantic's defense is 91st in the country. Yardage wise, you look like a decent offense against them. You should have put up more points, but I digress. And Purdue is like 94th. Basically, they're the same quality of defense. And really the eye test would bear that out when you watch Purdue so far this year struggle mightily in every single game, including parts of the Virginia Tech game. And apparently Virginia
Tech is not good.
They stink. So, and think about this irony, Harry. They scheduled Virginia Tech, I'm guessing 8 or 9 years ago. And I know that was maybe tail end of the Beamer era, beginning of the Justin Fuentes era, where they were still kind of Virginia Tech, thinking that's a marquee game. Then they get them when they suck. We schedule Kansas when they go 1-11 under Turner Gill, and now they're good.
Was that who it was? Was it Turner Gill?
That or one of the cavalcade of fat guys they've had come through there. Maybe it was Charlie Weiss. I don't know.
Charlie Weiss. I remember they had Mangino. He was the only good one they had. I think Mancinio or I don't know. But yeah, whatever his name was. No, yeah, that is funny because, you look at what Virginia Tech's been doing this year and, oh my God, they got blasted. Rutgers is decent. Here's the thing. Rutgers isn't what Rutgers was like 10 years ago. They're kind of, middle of the pack. They can make a bowl game every now and again. Good for them. But still, you get blasted like that by Rutgers. Yeah, you're in the doldrums.
I'll say this. I am glad that we are not playing at Rutgers this year. I wouldn't want any part of that. We got lucky with the Indiana at home, that's for sure. But anywho, Luke Altmeyer against Florida Atlantic, I thought he was phenomenal. What I really appreciate about Luke is, apart from the one flaw that has been consistent, which is occasionally holding on to the ball too long, that's been consistent through 4 games. Other than that, that's a kid that can take a hit. I don't know how many hits he's necessarily going to take against Purdue. I'm optimistic that we'll be able to scheme around that. And also the fact that Purdue's pass defense has been pretty rough. Their whole defense has been, but their pass defense and their ability to especially stop good receivers. So the connection, Harry, between Luke Altmeyer and Isaiah Williams, that's giving me a lot of feel-good vibes going forward because, especially for a younger quarterback, how essential is it that they have not just a safety blanket, the one guy they know they can throw to, but that safety blanket happens to be statistically and eye test wise a number 1 receiver. Isaiah's killing it this year.
Yeah, it's not like in the past when your safety blanket has been, well, our offense really hasn't been good to the point where you even had a safety blanket. But 9 times out of 10, a safety blanket is either a running back or a tight end. That's why in fantasy, if you're gonna pick a bad player, say or a good player or a player from a bad team with, say, a rookie quarterback, you're going to want to pick up, I don't know, like Miles Sanders on the Panthers, because who's Bryce Young going to be throwing it to? Him. Or say on a team with a young quarterback who has a decent tight end, you want to pick up that tight end because he's always 5 yards in front of you. To have it be a wide receiver and have it be your best wide receiver, Luke's able to have that kind of connection. He's hit him on a couple of deep throws this year. He had the one against Penn State. He had the one, like I said, the beautiful one this past weekend against FAU. That's huge. That's huge because that kind of gives Illinois something that we haven't had. I mean, when was the last time we had a vertical threat? I mean, you're talking like Ryan Lankford. You're someone who could actually go deep and actually stretch the field. I can't think of anyone.
I mean, I guess Josh Matterbebe had the ability
He was, yeah, but he was
bigger
more of like
body.
a big guy. Yeah. I mean, if he was going the distance, it's because he was catching a ball 10 yards and just bullying people over on his way for a touchdown. So I think it's huge. I think it's huge. And I think that the more consistent that that connection can be, because they had their best game this past weekend. The more consistent that can be, the more that opens up the passing game for your other guys. And it has to.
You know, another encouraging thing. Well, I say encouraging. It starts with a discouraging thing, but it grows encouraging because I think he'll grow into it. Is there were 2 missed deep throws in the second half that he could have had Isaiah twice more. He just overshot him in both of those cases. Better to overshoot than undershoot, that's for sure, because, you know, that's just, I would assume that's a cardinal rule for if you're going to throw deep, overthrow, right?
Yeah,
Can't,
you want to. The thing you always hear them say, especially say if it's an out of bounds throw or when you're in the end zone, you throw that fade. You want to put it where it's either a catch or it's incomplete. The last thing you want to do is if you're going to throw a jump ball, you don't want to throw it short because most of the time the DB is the guy who's trailing. He's not the guy that's in front.
you know, there's something about being in a stadium, and you were asking about deep threat, and I thought you were talking about quarterback, but you were referring to the wide receivers that could stretch the field. There is something about being in a stadium and knowing that at any given moment, your quarterback may just launch it 40 yards. And there were enough of those on Saturday. It's that kind of, oh, like everyone kind of gets 6 inches off their seat and they're watching. And, you know, that element of Luke Altmeyer, it's his overall demeanor. It's the fact that he bounced back. And yes, consider the opponent, but it's the fact that he bounced back from his worst game with his best. I think, Harry, the reason I'm super encouraged by him beyond the physical tools, which are obvious, is that it does seem like there is a swagger and a kind of quiet, confident leadership about him that kind of belies his age because he's only a 3rd-year redshirt sophomore player. It's not like he's some senior like a Tommy DeVito who had his confidence in spades last year. But he seems to have his own kind of variety of that. And I got to imagine that for the guys in the huddle, they can rally around any kind of confidence, whether it be quiet or loud.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't know Luke personally. Well, not honestly, obviously, I don't know Luke personally, but you're going to rally around your quarterback regardless of who it is, unless it's someone that you actively dislike, like it seems like the Jets do with Zach Wilson. my God, but it does help when that guy is also talkative. If that's what Luke's able to do, then it's easier, like you said, to rally around a guy like that. It is nice to see a quarterback on this team. And like you said, nothing against the guys who have been here in the past. Whether they were good quarterbacks or if they weren't able to, necessarily meet the bill. But this guy, he, like you said, when you say he has a swagger about him, I feel like he's got, and what that registers with me is he has the ability to make big plays. Like you could see Brandon Peters drop back there and he made a couple good throws, but you never really had the feeling that if it was like a 3rd and 5 that he was going to throw a 50-yard pass down the field. And this guy is someone who seems like he has the ability to do that. He has the ability to make something out of nothing. On that pass to Isaiah, he was 9 times out of 10 when we've seen an Illinois quarterback, 99 times out of 100 when you see a quarterback rolling out to the right, he's either going to run out of bounds, he's going to throw it out of bounds, he's going to throw a terrible pass. I don't remember the last time we saw a guy stop, set his feet, and throw a strike. So it is something different. It's that X factor that I think we've seen flashes of. And when you have a guy who's that young in Luke, who's going to be here for the foreseeable future, well, with college football these days, who knows? But let's just say that he's going to be here for the foreseeable future. That's something that bodes a lot of confidence because as as new guys come in, as he's able to develop his skill set even more, those flashes are going to start to hopefully turn into something more consistent.
Quick question. This relates to the offensive line and Luke. He has taken some hits this year. I mean, how much of a rallying cry is it when the guy takes the hit and delivers the throw? I mean, of course, the signature one was in game 1, but he's doing this on a semi-regular basis where he's taking a hit, or even if you take the trick play where he found the tight end down the right sideline, and he was under duress. He was able to make one guy miss and stay alive just enough to throw that ball. But I mean, from the stands, that's like, whoa, that's crazy good awareness in the pocket. But it also shows this toughness that he's not afraid to get hit. Is there a sort of contagious element within the huddle when you see your lead guy do something like that?
I will say, I mean, the first thing you always do as an offensive lineman when you see your quarterback get hit, or if you see your quarterback get hit, you see your running back get tackled, whether it's down the field or if it's behind the line of scrimmage, you go and you pick them up. That's the first thing you always want to do. So I would say after that, as that play is developing, I haven't even looked at the replay from Luke's point of view, but I'm sure if he's on the ground, the first thing that's happening is an offensive lineman is helping him up, and then they're celebrating as they're going down the field as the play develops into a touchdown. That's the extent of, I would say, maybe the excitement, at least from an offensive line's point of view, because you got to remember, if that's happening, that means that's one of your guys in all likelihood that took that shot. So when it comes back to film study, usually what you'll hear, what I could hear Coach Buck is saying right now would be, hey, look at this throw that he just made. If we give him time and don't get him killed, he's going to be able to do that. It's on us to not let that happen again. I mean, that throw, the 4th and 4 throw, week 1, where he gets absolutely annihilated, those are plays that are going to be seen as, that's great. That's great. It led to a win. It led to a win. It was a great play, probably the best play of the game. It's also going to be one that is a focal point of the offensive line unit, especially to say, we can't let that happen. This guy is able to win us games when this does happen. Imagine what he'd be able to do if we were able to keep his jersey clean.
When we tune into Peacock on Saturday, our eyes will be on the offensive line. I mean, that's the focus on the offense. It feels like you have enough knowns elsewhere that really the last remaining big question offensively, and I guess Lunny's play calling can be put into that, but let's say the offensive line plays a clean game, I think they're going to score some points. So defensively, despite the 96-yard drive at the end, and of course that's frustrating, the fire department was back, is what they called them last year, because they extinguished 3 really good opportunities for Florida Atlantic in that second half. And I thought for 3.5 quarters, again, the defense looked like last year. And there's some new toys out there, some bigger freshman cornerbacks like Toby, who had a great game. Sabor Kareem had 3 pass breakups. So what's your initial takeaway? Let's start with the secondary. All these new guys, these new pieces, and while the opposing quarterback, I think, got 250, it was 5.5 yards per attempt. You'll take that any day of the week. And I thought the secondary overall was pretty darn good.
Yeah, that just means accumulation. That's like my dad, this is completely off topic. My dad, when we look at the top running backs of all times, yardage wise, you always see Curtis Martin and Frank Gore up there. And he's like, what the hell? Those guys weren't any good. They were just in the league for a long time, which in and of itself is a crazy skill to have, being able to be a running back for that long without getting hurt. But I think this comes back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the season, because it was a worry. It was a worry, as I say twice, because when I put my hand in front of my face right there, I was like, I bet that couldn't come across right there. Now I'm going to listen back and I'm going to hear it and I'm going to be like, I didn't even have to say this whole 30-second little extra part anyway. I think that it comes back to the fact that the secondary development is a strength of this coaching staff, because you had some really solid pieces going into last year. I don't think anyone really thought that Devin Witherspoon was going to be the 5th pick in the NFL draft last year. That's a credit to the coaching staff. Have you seen, I'm an Eagles fan, so I see it. Have you seen Sidney Brown for the Eagles? Week 1, a huge hit on special teams. This past week, a breakup on Mike Evans in the end zone that would have been a touchdown. I mean, these guys are producing at the highest level. They're starters, and that starts with their being coached up by this coaching staff. So I think that there was obviously some hesitancy coming into this season with all the guys being as green as they were, but you got to imagine they're only going to get better, and to see them being able to mature this quickly ahead of the real Big Ten slate, it only instills more confidence.
This is going to sound reductionist almost, but if last year's defense was a 9 out of 10, and I think that's probably fair to say, all things considered, I mean, number one scoring defense in the nation. Can I give them?
I mean, that's what I was going to say. I mean, that might be 10 out of 10. I mean,
so
they're not Jordan.
This one to me is a 7 out of 10. I think when all said and done, this is a good 7 out of 10 defense. I think they're good. And I think that can be enough in a lot of these games. You have the known quantity up front, which really has started to kind of look themselves the last 2 games. And then you have the secondary, which, like you said, this seems to be the never-ending supply of Bielema and Aaron Henry. And I know Ryan Walters before that coach secondary guys. I mean, I got to say, Harry, and I want to get your perspective on this. When you're watching a defense, what unit do you look forward to watching the most? Because for me, I think in this pass-happy college football landscape, a really hard-hitting secondary, ball hawks and everything like that to me is really exciting. So I was just watching this Toby kid, Zachary Toby, in the second half thinking, who's this number 5? And he kept making himself known in his first action. And that's the kind of stuff that really excites me watching it.
It's fun watching a secondary. I mean, honestly, I think you're going to know my answer just because of my history and my tendencies. I watch the defensive line because if you have a good defensive line that's able to stuff up the run game or get pressure on the quarterback, it is beautiful to watch because think about it. The offensive line's job, their one job, is literally to either move you from point A to point B or to stand in front of you and use their strength to keep you from getting to where you want to go. That's all the offensive line is there to do. If you have guys that are able to, and I'm kind of using the Eagles Buccaneers game this past weekend as an example, or this past Monday as an example. On the defensive line, when you have a really good defensive line, Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis stuffing up that run game, it is one of the most beautiful things to watch because you just know it doesn't matter. You can put 4 guys, your 4 down linemen right there on the line, and you don't have to bring anyone extra. You're going to be able to stuff up the run game. That opens up so much more for your defense with the possibilities of lending help in the passing game. So I think what I watch is I watch Randolph, I watch Newton, I watch the pass rushers. I watch that to see, are we able to impose our will? Because that's really where, at the end of the day, as a offensive lineman, I watch it kind of with that simplistic mindset. I'm watching our defense against their offensive line. If their quarterback has all day and he has that pocket, you can tell it's going to be a long game. When we were losing that first, or when we were losing the line of scrimmage, and when Jalen Daniels had that kind of pocket against us, I looked at that and said, wow, it is going to, the way we win this game is if they just give it to us, because we have no pressure on them. There is so much space. We don't look like we belong with where our offense or with where our defensive line is at right there. And then consequently, whenever they were on defense, that offensive line was given, Luke no space. It didn't look like we were moving the trenches at all. So this is a very long roundabout way of saying I watch the defensive line because as a former offensive lineman, that's my way of saying, okay, how does it look like we are doing in this game from a physical point of view? How much stronger are we than them, or are they than us?
Let's talk about this game because this game means a lot. First question, what Big Ten West team do you want to beat more than Purdue? If the answer is no one, that's okay, because I've been pondering this, Harry. 2 years ago, I recall distinctly, so this is 2021, Isaac came over to record a podcast during the second half. Illinois loses 13-9. They punted late in their own territory. Purdue goes on like a 90-yard drive.
I kind of remember that. I was at work. I remember watching that. Yeah. Incredibly
frustrating. We actually, as I was trying to save that second half podcast, it just got destroyed. And I said, fine, good riddance. I just recorded a post-game podcast where I was really ticked off because it felt like the Maryland game before where you were overly conservative and you lost.
If I recall, because I only have snippets of that game, you were winning most of it, right? Was it like 9-6? You punted late. They go down the length of the field, just like Maryland, and then they score a touchdown, you get to like the 15-yard line, and then, what always happens, 2nd and 10, 3rd and 10, 4th and 10, turnover on downs.
Something like that. I think that's right. We did get a chance late. That was 2 years ago. Last year.
Let's not talk about last year.
They kept you from Indy. They kept you from Indy. You kind of kept yourselves from Indy, I think, with a very lackluster performance. But okay, so I kind of know my answer to this. What Big Ten West team do you want to beat more than Purdue at this moment? Is it anybody?
I mean, let's list them off. There's Minnesota.
Who cares?
There's Nebraska. There's Iowa. There's Northwestern. I guess it's Iowa because the win you had against them last year was it was grinded out. I kind of just want to see us, if we're ever able to beat them by multiple scores, which I have never seen. Last year was the first win over them I've ever seen. I've seen a couple wins against Wisconsin. I've seen a couple wins against Nebraska, Minnesota, and Northwestern. So I'd say Iowa. And that, I mean, Jesus, what we saw last week from Iowa against Penn State, good Lord. I would say here's what I'll say. It's Iowa, but it's like my hand on the screen is like way above the screen. This is where Purdue is, and then here's everyone else.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. Iowa has the history between the two schools, but oddly enough, I don't hate Iowa football as much as basketball because I don't hate Kirk Ferentz. I just can't for some reason. He just seems like a chill enough guy. He doesn't bother me.
Yeah. I mean, if you ask me, because it's hard to have. I was thinking about this the other day. It's hard for Illinois to necessarily have rivalries in football because we're not as much a threat to some of these other teams. So I do kind of think our biggest rivalry in football, at least the way it's felt for me, is Purdue, because we've had the most big games against them, whether or not they're actual big games or what the ones we circle. I mean, what was it? This one's huge. The one last year was obviously the biggest one in recent history. We had a game against them in 2019, right after Wisconsin in the muck, where we were basically saying this one is huge because Wisconsin, that win is big, but only big if you're able to back it up against Purdue. You go back to either, I think it was 17 or 18, where we were talking about how if we're going to make a bowl game, it's going to be because we beat Purdue and then we lose 42-7. You have, when you look back at any kind of semblance of a big game that Illinois has had in recent history, it's usually Purdue. So I would say them as far as what your biggest rivalries are. And then just this year, I mean, Indiana's the second one just for obvious reasons, but I don't think even that's that big a football rivalry either.
The narratives in this game are fascinating. We'll get to the personal thing between Bielema and Ryan Walters in a bit. Bielema has beaten every Big Ten West team except Purdue. I mean, you've beaten the likes of Wisconsin and Iowa as an Illinois head coach in your first 2 years, and you haven't beaten Purdue. And both of them, I'll say this. I think you play last year's game 10 times. The way those two teams came out that day, I think Purdue probably would have won 6 of them. It just didn't feel right. It wasn't right from the start, even before the interception that should have been for Witherspoon. I know that was a turning point, but it didn't feel right. So, and by the way, quick aside, my favorite Lovie Smith game was the Purdue game that year because, one, I wasn't there for the Wisconsin game, and it at the moment felt fluky. And then to follow it up with Purdue, and I know it was a rain, muddy, just mess over there, but you won convincingly. You dominated them, I think 20-6, or I don't even know. And it felt like, oh crap, like we've turned a corner. But I digress. This, Harry, to me, I look at Purdue, and no fault of their fans. I don't really have beef that much with Purdue historically, but anytime that I feel like a peer has a leg up on you, and there's no really explicable reason why, I get pissed. And I'm sick and tired of watching sold out Ross-Ade Stadium under the lights, that this freaking football program at Purdue actually kind of has a thing. And I'm still waiting for the thing. And my fear, Harry, if Illinois loses this game, I think it is tremendously damaging. I think it's damaging on the recruiting trail. I think it's damaging as far as how fans perceive Bielema in some way. I wouldn't jump the gun that far, but it would really suck losing to your protege. And a team that, honestly, if you play a B game, you should beat. Is this a must win? I mean, I know it's not as far as you could, of course, rattle off other ones, but for all the reasons I just listed, does it qualify as a must-win in a sense?
I'm always hesitant with the must-win narrative. It's one of those. It's not right up there, but it's kind of on par with my he's due narrative, which is my least favorite thing in all of sports. He hasn't got a hit in his last 30 plate appearances. That's why he's going to get one now. Let's put him up there, see what the kid can do. No, I think it's as close to a must win in a game that doesn't necessarily knock you in or out of anything as it could be, because the optics of it. If you lose, it's 3 losses in a row to Purdue, really, because we didn't play them in 2020, correct? I don't think we did.
The COVID year, I feel like you lost to them in Minnesota at home back to back or something like that.
Is that what I mean? That whole year is a blur to me. Regardless,
yeah, I mean, we were 2-6.
The last real win you had against Purdue would have been 2019, which is forever ago and ridiculous. I mean, and this is aside the point because this game isn't at home, but Jesus, when's the last time you beat Purdue in Champaign? I think it was probably before even I was going to school here.
I think because you didn't play them every year until the Big Ten. So if I recall, you did not play them the Rose Bowl year. You played them in 2008. No, you didn't. God dang, Harry. I mean, in 2009, you lost on the road to Purdue. In 2011, you lost on the road to Purdue. I get the feeling that you beat them randomly at home in 2010. And certainly, I mean, I don't know. Did Bill Cubit win at Purdue in 20? That was at Purdue in 2015.
That was my time there. We beat them at Purdue 2013. We had the orange out game where we lost to them, where they had like 400 yards rushing or something obscene. It wasn't 400 yards, but it was something obscene. 2015, you beat them by a lot. 2016,
I don't know if you played them.
Oh God, what happened in 2016? You would have to have played them because you were both in the West.
I don't know though, because maybe you're right about that. And I know that the 3 wins in 2016 were Murray State, Michigan State, Rutgers. I don't know. Shoot.
That's right. That sounds right. So yeah, you would have lost to them at home. I don't remember the game necessarily, but you would have lost them at home. So that's just a whole another side. Back to if this is a must win. Like I said, it's as close to a must win as you can have in a game that doesn't have any actual standing implications because of the optics. You don't want to lose to arguably right now, I'd say they're your biggest rival in football. I'd say, I know you don't necessarily have the same kind of history or the in-state thing that you have with Northwestern, but Northwestern's a tire fire, and Purdue you actually have this hatred for because of what they did to you last year. So I would say that with that, the fact that you haven't beat them, the fact that it is his protege who's, not looked good so far. You don't want his first good looking performance to be against the team that he was with last year. I think that it would be damaging to say, if you lose this game in any fashion, if a guy's trying to pick between you and Purdue, what can you show him like a reason why to pick you over Purdue? Your best year was last year, and Purdue was better than you. That's troubling. You need to get off the schneid. You need to beat them again eventually.
Good use of off the schneid. I mean, here's the thing: if you lose this thing, I mean, let's also talk about the optics. I mean, they got a young coach with bulging biceps that wears tight black t-shirts to press conferences. That just pisses me off. They got the young cool coach who so far has struggled. Bury him. Harry, I'm afraid the bloodlust is going to come out when I watch this game. And here's the approach I'm trying to take, foolish and futile as it may be. You got to win. I got to see it. I got to see this Illinois team put together a solid B game. They don't need to play an A+ game to win this. They just got to play a solid B game, and I think they sneak out a win at Purdue. And if everything goes right, I think they can actually beat this Purdue team, much like Syracuse, much like Wisconsin. Because here's this random thought I had, Harry, and I ran this by Trevor and Isaac. I want to run it by you. In the Big Ten West, as far as highest ceiling, I'm talking if everything goes right, I actually think highest ceiling belongs to 2 teams, Wisconsin, and Illinois. But the problem is with high ceilings, that doesn't mean the floor is necessarily high either. I think this game is just they got to win it, because I think it does have ramifications beyond Saturday, and even just looking at this year for bowl eligibility, but also showing people they can win toss-up games. They can beat lesser teams than them. It's got to happen, man. What do you think about the ceiling hypothesis that I had?
It's tough to say anyone in the Big Ten West has a high ceiling, man. I mean, this division looks pretty bad. I mean, I would have said on the opposite side, I would have said before this past week, the highest floor would easily have been Minnesota, because when's the last time we didn't see them win 7 or 8 games? Not anymore. Not when you lose a 31-10 lead against the worst team in Power 5. I mean, Jesus, Jones. I would say highest ceiling, I would say, because of a promising coach, even though I keep coming back to the fact that Luke Fickell is not shown at the Big Ten level. He's promising. There's a reason he got the job at Wisconsin. I would say, yeah, and because we've seen them do it. There's a reason they got ranked, even with not having a great year last year at the offset of this season. So I think by default, they're probably the team with the high ceiling. I think if you take coaching staff into consideration, though, then you probably would throw Illinois in there. That's just because, though, of the coaching staff, because otherwise what we've seen on the field so far doesn't really back that up. I would be hesitant to say that Iowa's probably the team with the highest floor right now. I mean, they got blown out, but that's Penn State. That happens. That was at Happy Valley. So, you know, what's funny is my dad actually texted me early on. He said, wow, Iowa looks good. And then I was like, oh, it's like 7-0, 10-0. Yeah, I guess so. And then I keep looking back. I'm like, wow, maybe that text was sarcastic, because they got blitzed. But I would say probably they have the highest floor right now. Highest ceiling, though, because, yeah, I got to go with Wisconsin. I want to put us there. I just, from what we've seen this season so far, and I hate myself for it, but I do still have that feeling, because I think I know what question you were going to ask coming up. I still think we kind of win this game handily. At the beginning of the season, I thought we were going to win this game by a couple touchdowns. I mean, you're not the only one with the bloodlust. I mean, oh my God, how pissed they must be going into that game. The closest thing I've ever had to it would have been, because we didn't have any huge revenge narrative games when I was at Illinois. We didn't, because we just weren't necessarily that good. When I was in high school, my junior year, we were probably one of the best teams in Florida. And in the middle of the season, we lost a random game to this team called Edgewater. We lost they were like a middle of the pack team who beat us by 2 touchdowns. And it was because we came into that game not ready. And the next year, oh my God, did we want to kill them. And we came out, I think we won by a couple touchdowns, because you come out there and you want to just make sure they know that all week the coaches are going to kind of be saying a little bit of, hey, just focus on what you're doing, focus on what you're doing. They're also kind of saying, focus on what you're doing. P.S. Remember what these MFers did to you last year. And that was just for me in high school. These guys didn't get to go to Indianapolis to play a team that they probably should have beaten earlier in that season. Who knows what happens if it's on a neutral field? I think that paired with the fact that Illinois, even looking as average as we have this year, look better than Purdue. And the away team seems to have the advantage in this series for whatever reason. So, or I guess Purdue does when they're the away team. We kind of split with them when we're there. But I think I just have this feeling you're going to come out and you know, the way I think it gets done, I don't think Luke's going to have a huge game. It's just that turf there, the grass, it's mucky, it's ugly. Even if it's not raining, it's always getting torn up. It's not the greatest playing surface in the world. So I think it's going to be this is the game the offensive line has to impose their will. And against a weaker defense, I think this is where you do it. I think you run this ball down their throat, and I think you win a game where maybe it's like, oh God, I would love a game where it's like 24-6. where it's like, okay, the score, it's not a crazy blow, or even just like 20-6, but it's like, damn, they were never in this game. That's what I think that the coaches should come into this game with the mindset of, and that's kind of what I have the feeling is going to happen.
20-6. Wow. I will let people know that we both predicted a win at Kansas, but I will say that was after one game. You were still going, Harry, off of the 4-game sample size you've seen from Illinois and the bits and pieces you've seen from Purdue. Even with the messiness with Illinois, you foresee a win, and you do think that the mental component of this game will be in Illinois' favor as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's too overwhelmingly obvious to not be there. The coming into this game, when we watch it on whatever it's going to be, Peacock, NBC, what is not NBC anymore, right? It's Peacock. That game, they're going to show you the graphic. They're going to show you flashbacks to last year's game, and they're going to show you, they're going to show you week, whatever it is, 12 or 13, when Purdue beats Indiana and gets to go to Indianapolis instead of you. They're going to show it. So these guys are thinking about that, because whether they're, and I even wouldn't be surprised to see guys like Sidney Brown, Palcho come back and say, like, on whether it's even just a Zoom video or something, you got to get it done this week against this team. They kept us from having the best season in Illinois history last year, and you got to make sure that they know it.
Oh boy. Here's the thing, Harry. I still believe in Bret Bielema. I believe that Bret Bielema is the best opportunity this program has to really get solid footing. And I recognize it's not going to be perfect, and certainly this year it has not been. Another mantra I've been saying for a couple weeks now: third-year Bret Bielema needs to beat first-year Ryan Walters and first-year Matt Rule. He has to. It has to happen. And personnel-wise, you are not at a disadvantage against either of these teams. And it is a situation where I think you could safely argue you have a personnel advantage against both of these teams. Now, while Illinois has not put together a complete game, and I don't feel great about it, even after these first 4 games, I got to say, when push comes to shove, Illinois wins. They have, I keep saying they have to, and it's like, well, what do you mean, Carp? It's like, well, for so many reasons. The mental aspect of it for them, the revenge narrative. Bielema's record usually in revenge narrative games. Last year against Purdue was one that, if you qualify that as a revenge game after the 2021 game, they didn't quite show up for it. But this is a revenge game. This is a classic Bret Bielema revenge game.
I mean, this is the biggest revenge game you've had since what? I mean, 2007, you had a great season. So 2008 against Michigan didn't have that kind of feeling.
Yeah.
I mean,
smoked him in 2008, but it wasn't because of revenge. No, it was the juice unconscious that day.
I mean, would it have been if you played Michigan in 2002? Or no, the Michigan was 2000.
2000, and that boy, oh boy, was that. I've never seen and never will see Memorial Stadium that lit. It was absolutely insane. And, there were bad calls at the end of it, which helped you find your way to a loss. And what was just, oh man, I've never seen a bloodlusty crowd like that.
I mean, I remember I texted Lon last year after the Purdue game, because I was really upset after the Indiana game, but that one stuck with me a little bit more than I thought it would, and that I'm surprised in hindsight that it did, because it was so early in the season. But that one stuck with me for a little bit. I don't even remember most of the time how I feel about that game now, because what I felt after the Purdue game. I texted Lon after that saying, is this on par with 2000 Michigan? Because I don't even want to imagine, like, as far as the feeling you had after a loss in that, I was distraught. That broke me more than any other Illinois loss in my time as a player or a fan.
Me too, Harry. For modern, the reason 2000 stung as much as it did is it felt like we were on the press. And you're probably going to say, well, yeah, we felt like that last year, because of the build up to that game. And actually, 2000 wasn't a revenge game. You beat them in 1999. So the thought was, oh, now they come here and we're going to be even better. And we're going to beat Michigan twice. And we are going to affirm our status under Ron Turner, of all people. We're going to affirm our status as a new team to be reckoned with in the Big Ten. ABC, Saturday night, 6:30, the drunkest, loudest, angriest fans I've ever seen. It was intoxicating for I guess I would have been an 8th grader to just feel that energy in the place. It was insanity, Harry. And it was the most dejecting walking out of that stadium, and it took for freaking ever because it was packed to the brim. And we're going down the, ramps in the southeast, the tunnels that get you up to the upper deck. And people were despondent. And because of that shared despondency, it was a little bit different than last year where, there were like 35,000 people on a really crappy weather day. The Michigan State loss took a lot of energy, a lot of wind out of people's sails. And I was still there to rah-rah them through, and it sucked. Man, it really did. But no, I am in complete agreement with Lon. The Michigan loss in 2000 was soul-crushing. It really felt like we missed a grand opportunity, and then that team completely flailed the rest of the season to a 5-6 record, and they were too good for that.
I mean, hey, though, they flew right into 2001 with that explosive team that year, so that's all you can ask for.
And to their credit, after the 5-6 season, Kirk Kittner got injured in that second-to-last game at home against Ohio State. Mike Doss, do you remember that safety, Mike Doss? He was early 2000s, played in the NFL. He leveled Kittner. And I don't recall if it was a dirty hit. It might have been helmet to helmet, but I can't recall. And that took away any opportunity of getting a 6th win and going to a bowl game. But I digress because we're talking sad stuff. Here's the deal. Here's the deal. If they win, and I don't care if it's by 1 point in the ugliest game that we have ever seen, if they win for the first time this year, Harry, I think Illini football fans will feel something they haven't felt really since last year at Nebraska, and that's joy. That's joy, because the Toledo game was phew, and the Florida Atlantic game was okay, whatever. But last November and the bowl game left you thinking, oh, well, that's kind of a bummer. Joy.
Yeah.
I felt that for way too freaking long.
Yeah. With the first 4 weeks of the year so far, even if you throw in Penn State as a Big Ten, opponent, it's kind of different. It still almost has that non-conference-y feel because you don't play them nearly as much. When you are in conference play, like you said, even say we get to the end of the year in which this could happen. I kind of leaning towards, I don't think it will, but we could be in this situation where last game of the year, you need to beat Northwestern in order to win the Big Ten West, right? Wisconsin, God, I just said them. Northwestern looks as bad as they have all year. They're 2-9 to that point because somehow they got that one over Minnesota. But you're going into that game. You should have no problem. You beat them by 30 the last 2 years. If you beat them by, like you said, a point, you don't care. I mean, that's a perfect example as it happened in 2001. You won the Big Ten championship with an ugly game over Northwestern, right? They weren't that good.
Oh, yeah, it was actually you were up 6. Northwestern had the ball. They had Christian Morton, our cornerback, beat. Christian slipped. And we are watching with bated breath as this pass sails over the head of the Northwestern receiver. We've been the go-ahead touchdown. And it was unnecessarily close, but that's a great example of it. And here's the thing, Harry. I mean, even what we've seen, the Big Ten West title, it sounds ludicrous based on the first 4 games, but at Purdue, Nebraska at home, I don't know. I'm sorry. If you're okay, you should win those 2 games. Minnesota, I don't care if it's on the road. We played them just fine on the road 2 years ago. I think we can do it again. They look bad, and they have a terrible Malaki.
Kaliakmanis. I got it.
Thank you.
I knew I was going to need to be able to pronounce it because you were going to just call him Kaliakalaka.
Yeah, sorry. And I'm not making fun of Greek names, by the way. I love Greek names. I'm just making fun of the fact that he's entirely mediocre. And then Northwestern. So think about this. You could find yourself in a situation where if you simply split Wisconsin and Iowa, and you win these other games that, I mean, if this team picks it up, they certainly can. You potentially could have a 5-1 record against the Big Ten West going into the Northwestern game. And I got to think that'd be enough. regardless of what happens against Maryland. That would put you 3 losses, 5-3 if you include Penn State, Maryland, and either Iowa or Wisconsin. All I'm saying is, this is big on its face in the moment on Saturday, but it's also potentially big if this team is to figure it out within the next few weeks and actually start playing like a team that could challenge for the Big Ten West. You don't want this looming in the background as an early disappointing loss that just completely derails any chance you have.
I mean, like Indiana last year. I mean, I'm sorry, but if you win that game against Indiana, I'm not necessarily sure how the tiebreakers work out, but I think you have a chance to win the Big Ten West. Then, I mean, it plays out differently as the season goes on. Because I think you do, because you ended tied with Purdue.
No, they ended 7-2. They ended 7-2, and they were let me make sure that's right. They were 7-2. You were 6-3. Is that right? Or were you 5-4? You were 5-4. They were 6-3, and their other non-conference loss was to Syracuse. So what would have happened is, you could have beaten Indiana, and you'd also be at 6-3. What you needed was for Purdue to lose at Indiana, us to beat Northwestern, and Nebraska to beat Iowa to get a
three-way side.
Yes, and then you go for the Big Ten West records, and we would have had the best overall. So, yeah.
I think we don't know. I don't think this is going to happen because of how bad the division has looked in general. But I mean, I think you're looking at it and saying, if you win the games you're supposed to, which are all the games that aren't Wisconsin, Iowa, and Maryland, and you split Wisconsin and Iowa, that gives you a shot.
Yes.
Because what are you going to do if Wisconsin goes on a heater? What are you going to do if Iowa pulls off an upset? Because I know a bunch of these teams are with their crossovers. I don't know if Wisconsin plays Michigan or Ohio State, or if Iowa plays one of those two. Well, what are you going to do if they pull the upset of the year and beat Michigan or beat Ohio State? There's nothing you can do about that. But if you split those, it gives you a shot. And that's all you can ask for, because we've seen Purdue started out, I think, what was it? They did not start out super great last year, and they won the Big Ten West.
Northwestern lost to Florida Atlantic at home. Sound familiar? I mean,
Northwestern started, I think, 0-2 or 0-3 the first time they won the Big Ten West in 2019. It doesn't necessarily matter what you're doing in the non-conference, as long as you're able to pick it up once you get into the meat of your schedule, the important part, the conference play. I mean, the way that the Eagles have been playing this so far this season, they're 3. It's not it's apples and oranges. It's not a perfect analogy, but they've looked kind of a little sloppy, albeit on their way to a 3-0 record. But what you keep hearing Jalen Hurts saying and Nick Sirianni saying is, we're not playing our best football. We shouldn't be playing our best football. And that's kind of the mindset that hopefully these guys are having, is that we got out of the first 4 games of the season 500, and we did not play the way we wanted to play. And I'm also kind of, narrowly looking in on the offensive line on this. We have not played the way that we want to play. We are going up against some big boys now. We need to be able to, we got to be able to nut up on this part of the season and really be able to kind of impose our will against weaker teams, even if they are in our division, especially in the trenches. You got to be able to push around Purdue. You got to be able to push around the likes of Northwestern, Indiana. Those are the ones. And then the other ones, it's just, like you said, the games where it's more so what we've seen a lack of, whether it's from Minnesota or Nebraska, than anything you've seen on your side. So, I mean, it matters what you do early. You can't destroy, you can't make your season early on, but you can end your season early on.
Yes.
And so far, I think they've stayed afloat. So at the end of the day, at the first 4 weeks look the way we want them to? No. If you are able to just don't do what you did last year, because, I mean, hey, when's Illinois going to start 7-1 again? It doesn't happen. If you are able to make this a memorable season, if you're able to split with Iowa and Wisconsin, if you're able to go into Northwestern with a chance to win the Big Ten West, who the hell is going to care how you looked against Toledo and FAU early on? And that's kind of what the mindset's going to be for this team, I think.
You said 20-6, so you expect a low scoring kind of grungy, dirty affair. Yeah.
Yeah, I just, it's hard for me to think that there's ever going to be high scoring when this game's at West Lafayette. That place, it just seems muggy even when it's not. This team, Hudson Card is a decent quarterback, but I until I see it, I guess, from Purdue, because I guess they put up some points against Fresno State. They kind of put up some points against Syracuse, but I think your defense, like you said, is coming to coming up a little bit. Maybe I'll amend that. But what I want to say is that I think this game isn't going to be close, even if the score indicates that it is. Like, I don't know, 21-10, 21-13, but you kind of are in control for the most part.
Fair. I'm going to go considerably more high scoring because I think it's just going to get weird. I think it's going to be Illinois 30, and let's call it Purdue 23. And the big difference in this game is going to be that the defense, while I like a lot of what they've done, Hudson Card is a guy that can make some plays, and Purdue just always seems to have playmakers that trouble us. Even Devin McAbee last year, who had a really good game, and it was like, what the hell is this? So I'm saying the 23 because the most encouraging part of last week was, for the defense, they were continually able to make stops when it counted the most. And I would count holding Purdue to a field goal when they go on some extended drives, holding them to 4 field goals, or I guess that would be 3 field goals and 2 touchdowns. Meanwhile, finally, the offense scoring output matches the yardage output. I mean, credit to this offense. Barry Lunny can drive me crazy because I feel like the identity is still lacking and it's very inconsistent. Iowa put up 76 yards against Penn State. Yes, at Penn State. You put up 380. And that was with 4 turnovers. There's something there. And it feels like there's something still left untapped. I think they finally kind of do it because of that extra juice they have behind them, mentally speaking, in this game. And you win 30-23 and feel great. And if you lose, we'll cover that Sunday. But win and you feel great. You feel awesome going into Nebraska next Friday.
I apologize to the listeners for this truck outside of the apartment that has just been making noise for the last 20 seconds.
And hardly hear it. You're fine.
I mean, it's making that beep when you back up, but you don't need to back up for that long. I thought you that going for like 5 seconds. It is still going. Whatever. Yeah, man. You've seen, it stopped for a second. You've seen me as despondent Illini former player and current fan Harry Black. That was 2017, 2018 when they just, I always start the season with high expectations, and then you have that one loss. Until I see that one loss this year, and it could, could it be this week? Who knows? We didn't think we were going to lose 42-7 to Purdue in 2018, but it happened. It happens. If this game gets out of hand and you lose by multiple scores, that's hard to live with.
Yep. It can't, and frankly, it can't. And honestly, I just think that knowing Purdue might just actually stink this year, Harry, and they might just actually stink. And Ryan Walters is a first-year coach. That's tough sledding. Get it done, and no matter how you get it done, it feels great. So here's the deal. We'll talk next week. Hope to God it's about a 3-2 team with a very messy Nebraska team coming in, and another opportunity for Illinois to right this ship, because the winning has to start now, Harry. It's got to start now. Otherwise, we're going to be concerned through the entire month of October. I want to start having some fun again. So I always have fun talking with you, even if it's not after a great game or anything. So we'll have good things to talk about next Wednesday. Yes, right?
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling good about this one. Hopefully I'll be able to have what you always say with the sponsors, a celebratory calzone, because there is actually a DP dough here in stores.
Wow.
There's a DP dough, and there's well, that's the only one I'm going to say because the other ones aren't sponsors. But yeah, there's a yeah. So
we have the other calzone places and stores, infringing on the DP dough market.
No, what are you talking about? I mean, I love me some DP. What? That's it's my favorite college food.
They got stickers with that too, so they really played into that as well. Harry, we'll talk to you next week, man. Always appreciate it.
All right.
See you, bud. That is Harry Black joining us here on the 200 level, episode 3. Tree 55. Group X fans might remember 55. DPDO, speaking of, online at dpdo.com for all the best deals and prices, dpdo.com. Also, State Farm agent Brian Hansen, online at brianismyguy.com. Life, auto, home, business, renters, you name it. Brian is my guy, and he can be your guy as well at brianismyguy.com. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend. Give them a call at 217-841-4728. That's Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing. Also, Owen Builders LLC, online at owenbuildersllc.com. Go online to check a gallery of their awesome work. That's Luke Owen and the awesome craftsmen at owenbuildersllc.com. Got to thank Champagne Showers Podcast Network, and thank you, the listener. If you could rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, that goes a long way. Time to win. Time to win a damn game. So let's get it done. Hopefully when we talk to you Sunday, it will be about something good. Have a great few days. Have a great start to your weekend. And may we be talking about a 3-2 team in just a few days. It is the 200 level.